Part 2. Captain Ryan Carter finally reached the eclipse, his arrival greeted by a mix of relief and chaos. The docking bay was alive with activity as engineers scrambled to repair damaged systems, while others worked to restore communication with the rest of the fleet. Ava Morales met him at the entrance, her face pale but determined. She saluted quickly before launching into an update. "Captain, we've got partial control of the ship back online," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her eyes. "But we're still losing ground. Whatever's out there, it's not just rogue drones anymore." Ryan nodded, taking in the scene around him. The eclipse was a mess. Wires hung loose from panels, half-repaired consoles blinked erratically, and crew members shouted orders over the hum of machinery. It wasn't the picture of order he'd expected when waking up, but it was better than nothing. "Tell me everything," Ryan said, motioning for her to lead the way to the bridge. As they walked, Ava filled him in on the situation. "We've identified two distinct threats so far. First, there are the drones. They're targeting our satellites and cutting off our ability to gather intel. Second, there's something bigger lurking near Europa. We picked up strange energy signatures that don't match anything human-made." Ryan frowned. "Europa? That's dangerously close. Any idea what it is?" Ava hesitated. "Not yet, but whatever it is, it's massive. And it's moving slowly, like it's waiting for something." They arrived on the bridge, where Nathan Cole stood hunched over a console, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up briefly as Ryan approached, offering a quick nod of acknowledgement before returning to his work. "Nathan, status report." Ava said, "We managed to patch together some footage from one of the surviving satellites." Nathan replied, pulling up a grainy image on the main screen. The feed showed a dark shape floating against the icy backdrop of Europa. It was enormous, its surface covered in jagged protrusions that glinted faintly in the sunlight. "It looks like a ship," Ryan murmured, studying the image. "Or maybe a station. Either way, it's not natural." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. If this thing belonged to whoever or whatever was behind the attacks, then humanity was in serious trouble. Commander Ethan Blake entered the bridge moments later, his expression grim. Blake was a seasoned officer known for his no-nonsense attitude and tactical brilliance, but even he seemed shaken by recent events. "Captain, we need to act fast," Blake said without preamble. "If that thing decides to attack, we won't stand a chance. My recommendation is to launch a preemptive strike before it gets too close." Ryan turned to face him. "And risk provoking them further? We don't even know what we're dealing with." Blake crossed his arms. "Exactly. Ignorance doesn't give us the luxury of caution. Every second we waste gives them more time to prepare." The argument escalated quickly, with Blake pressing for immediate action and Ryan insisting on gathering more information first. Ava watched silently, torn between the two perspectives. She understood Blake's urgency. The fleet was vulnerable, but she also knew rushing and blindly could lead to disaster. Before the debate could spiral out of control, Samantha Sam Lewis, the ship's chief engineer, stepped forward. Her hands were smudged with grease, and her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, but her voice carried authority. "Excuse me, Captain," Sam interjected. "I hate to interrupt, but we have bigger problems. Our weapon systems are barely functional, and most of our fighters are offline. Even if we wanted to launch a strike, we couldn't do it effectively." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Then what do you suggest?" Sam glanced at the screen, showing the mysterious object near Europa. "I say we send a small recon team to investigate. Get eyes on the target before making any decisions. In the meantime, I'll focus on getting the fleet back in fighting shape." Ryan considered her words. It was a risky plan, but it made sense. They needed answers, and soon. "All right," he said finally. "Ava, Nathan, assemble a team. Head to Europa and see what you can find." Keep communications open at all times. If things go south, pull out immediately. Ava nodded, already mentally preparing for the mission. Understood, sir. Blake didn't look happy about the decision, but he held his tongue. For now at least, the chain of command held firm. Hours later, Ava and Nathan boarded a sleek reconnaissance craft along with a handful of volunteers. The journey to Europa felt surreal, the vast emptiness of space stretching endlessly around them. Jupiter loomed in the distance, its massive form casting long shadows across the moon's dot. As they approached their destination, the mysterious object came into clearer view. Up close, it was even more intimidating, a monolithic structure bristling with sharp edges and glowing veins of energy that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. This doesn't feel right, one of the pilots muttered nervously. It's like it's alive. Ava ignored the comment, focusing instead on scanning the area. Nathan, what are your readings saying? He adjusted the sensors, frowning at the data streaming across his screen. Energy output is off the charts. Whatever this thing is, it's powered by something we've never seen before. Also, there's movement inside. Movement? Ava repeated, her stomach tightening. Before Nathan could elaborate, the ship's alarms blared. On the radar, multiple contacts appeared, closing in rapidly. They found us, Nathan said grimly. Ava gripped the controls, her mind racing. Everyone, prepare for evasive maneuvers. This just got a lot more complicated. Outside, dark. Shapes emerged from the shadows of Europa's ice fields. Sleek and angular, they moved with predatory precision, surrounding the recon craft in seconds. There was no mistaking it now, they weren't alone, and the stars seemed darker than ever. Word. Count. Approximately 800. Part 3. The alien ships moved with eerie grace, their sleek forms gliding effortlessly through the void. Ava's hands tightened on the controls as she tried to keep the recon craft steady. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing louder than the hum of the engines. The enemy vessels surrounded them, forming a tight circle that left no room for escape. Nathan, can we break through? Ava asked, her voice strained but calm. Nathan didn't respond immediately. His eyes darted across the sensor readings, his fingers flying over the console. They're too fast, he said finally. If we try to run, they'll cut us off before we get anywhere. Ava gritted her teeth. Running wasn't an option, not with those things closing in so quickly. She glanced at the rest of the crew. The volunteers who had come with her were tense, gripping their seats or checking their weapons instinctively. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. The fear in the air was palpable. We need to communicate, Ava said firmly. If they're intelligent, maybe we can reason with them. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You really think they'll listen? It's better than shooting first and asking questions later, Ava shot back. Open a channel. Let's see if they respond. Nathan nodded and activated the comm system. A series of tones and pulses filled the cockpit, simple, non-aggressive signals designed to convey peaceful intent. For several long moments, there was no reply. Just the silent stare of the alien ships as they hovered menacingly around the recon craft. Then, without warning, one of the ships fired. The blast struck the side of the recon craft, sending it spinning wildly out of control. Alarms screamed as lights flashed red across the cockpit. Ava fought to stabilize the ship, her training kicking in despite the chaos. She managed to level them out, but the damage was done. Smoke poured from a ruptured panel, and sparks flew as systems shorted out. They're not interested in talking, Nathan muttered, his face pale. What now? Ava's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the aliens, and fighting back was suicide. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But surrendering wasn't an option either. Not yet. Not until they knew more about what they were dealing with. Activate the emergency beacon, Ava ordered. Let the fleet know we're under attack. And prepare the MP pulse. One of the volunteers frowned. An EMP. Won't that knock out our own systems too? It'll give us a chance to regroup, Ava replied sharply. Right now, that's all we've got. Nathan hesitated but followed her orders. He tapped a sequence into the console, activating the electromagnetic pulse device hidden within the craft. With a flick of a switch, the pulse surged outward, bathing the surrounding area in a burst of energy. For a moment, everything went still. The alien ships froze mid-flight, their movements halted as their systems struggled to recover from the shock. Ava seized the opportunity, pushing the recon craft forward with every ounce of thrust it had left. The engines roared as they broke, free of the encircling ships, leaving the immobilized enemies behind, but the victory was short-lived. As they sped away, one of the alien ships regained functionality and gave chase. Its speed was unmatched, and it quickly closed the gap between them. Another blast rocked the recon craft, this time disabling one of its thrusters. We're not going to make it, someone shouted from the back. Ava clenched her jaw, refusing to give up. Hold on, she yelled, steering the craft toward a cluster of icy debris floating near Europa's surface. If they could lose the pursuer among the jagged rocks, they might stand a chance. The alien ship followed relentlessly, weaving through the debris with terrifying precision. Ava pushed the recon craft harder, dodging chunks of ice and narrowly avoiding collisions. The stress of the maneuver took its toll. The ship groaned under the strain, and warning lights blinked furiously across the dashboard. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a narrow crevice between two massive ice formations. Ava guided the craft inside, hoping the tight space would deter their pursuer. To her relief, the alien ship hesitated at the entrance, its sensors likely calculating the risk of following them into such a confined area. They're not coming in, Nathan said, exhaling sharply. At least not yet. Ava allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but she knew they weren't safe. The recon craft was badly damaged, and the aliens could easily find another way to corner them. They needed to get back to the fleet and fast. Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse, Captain Ryan Carter watched helplessly as the recon team's signal flickered and died. The bridge was eerily quiet, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on everyone present. Blake paced back and forth, his frustration boiling over. This is why I said we should have attacked first, he snapped, glaring at Ryan. Part 4. Captain Ryan Carter clenched his fists as the recon team's signal disappeared from the monitors. The bridge of the Eclipse felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. Blake's words echoed in his ears, but Ryan forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper now wouldn't help anyone. Enough, Ryan said firmly, cutting off Blake's rant. Arguing won't bring them back. Focus on what we can do. Blake shot him a glare but didn't push further. Instead, he turned to one of the officers at the sensor station. Can we still track their last known position? The officer shook her head. Negative, sir. The MP pulse wiped out our readings for a few seconds. By the time the sensors came back online, they were gone. Ryan frowned, leaning over the console to study the data. There had to be something they could use, some clue, no matter how small. If Ava and her team were still alive, every second counted. We need to send a search party, Ryan said finally. But not blindly. Sam, how long until the fleet is ready to move? Sam Lewis looked up from her work, wiping sweat from her forehead. She'd been running between engineering teams nonstop since the recon mission began. Another hour, maybe. 2. The weapon systems are still shaky, and half the ships don't have full power yet. We're doing everything we can, but it's going to take time. Ryan nodded reluctantly. Time was a luxury they didn't have, but rushing in unprepared would only make things worse. He turned to Nathan Cole, who had stayed behind on the Eclipse to assist with tactical planning. Nathan, I need you to analyze the alien energy signatures we picked up earlier, Ryan said. Anything that might give us an edge if we go after them. Nathan nodded and got to work, his fingers flying over the keyboard. As he sifted through the data, patterns began to emerge. The energy readings matched frequencies used by Earth's old deep space probes, sent centuries ago to explore distant star systems. This isn't random, Nathan muttered, his voice low but urgent. These aliens know about us. They've studied our technology. Ryan's stomach sank. If the enemy had been monitoring humanity for years or even decades, they were at a massive disadvantage. But there was also a glimmer of hope. Understanding their tactics might offer a way to fight back. Keep digging, Ryan ordered. Find anything else you can. Hours later, Ava Morale sat slumped in the pilot's seat of the damaged recon craft. Her body ached from the constant strain of evading the alien ship, and exhaustion was starting to set in. The crevice where they'd taken refuge offered temporary safety, but she knew it wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, the aliens would find a way to flush them out. Nathan leaned over a portable scanner, analyzing the surrounding area. There's a thermal vent nearby, he said quietly. If we disable the heat signature from the engines, we might be able to hide long enough to repair the thruster. Ava nodded. It was a risky plan, but it was better than sitting ducks. Do it, and make sure everyone stays quiet. Any noise could give us away. The crew worked quickly, shutting down non-essential systems and masking the ship's presence as best they could. For a while, the silence outside was absolute. No movement, no sounds, just the cold emptiness of space pressing against the hull. Then, faintly, Ava heard it. A low hum, almost imperceptible at first, grew louder. She froze, listening intently. The sound wasn't coming from the ship, it was inside her head. What is that? One of the volunteers whispered, clutching their helmet nervously. I don't know, Ava replied, though unease prickled at the edges of her mind. The hum intensified, accompanied by flashes of strange images, towering structures, shadowy figures moving in synchronized patterns, and glowing symbols etched into stone. Ava, are you okay? Nathan asked, noticing her pale expression. She blinked, shaking her head to clear the visions. I'm fine. Just focus on the repairs. But the sensation lingered, gnawing at her thoughts like a persistent itch. The more she tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. Finally, unable to resist, she closed her eyes and let the images wash over her. What she saw chilled her to the core. Back aboard the Eclipse, tensions continued to rise. Blake paced the bridge, muttering under his breath about wasted opportunities. Ryan ignored him, focusing instead on the growing pile of intel gathered by Nathan and the engineering team. They're using frequencies similar to our old probes, Nathan explained, pointing to a graph on the screen. But there's something else, a secondary layer embedded within the signals. It's complex like code. Ryan leaned closer, studying the patterns. Code? You mean like a message? Maybe, Nathan admitted. Or instructions. It's hard to tell without more context. Before Ryan could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as red lights flashed across the bridge. Everyone scrambled to their stations, searching for the source of the disturbance. It's another attack, someone shouted. Multiple contacts incoming. Ryan's heart sank. The aliens weren't content with picking off stragglers. They were targeting the fleet directly now. On the main viewport, dark shapes materialized out of the void, surrounding the Eclipse and its sister ships. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, as they positioned themselves for maximum impact. Raise shields, Ryan barked. All hands, prepare for battle. Blake stepped forward, his face grim but resolute. Looks like we're getting our chance after all. Ryan didn't argue. This time they had no choice but to fight. But as the first volley of alien fire struck the fleet, He couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. Amidst the chaos, Ava's vision returned with startling clarity. The images had faded, leaving behind fragments of knowledge, fragments that made her blood run cold. She opened her eyes, meeting Nathan's concerned gaze. "They're not just machines," she said softly. "They're sentinels. Guardians left behind by an ancient civilization to protect their secrets." Nathan frowned. "Secrets? What kind of secrets?" Ava hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Something powerful. Something dangerous. And if we don't stop them, they'll destroy anything or anyone that gets too close." Her voice carried a weight that silenced the entire crew. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Nathan broke the silence. "So what do we do?" Ava took a deep breath, determination hardening her features. "We survive, and we warn the others. Because if the fleet doesn't understand what we're dealing with, none of us will make it out alive." Word count: approximately 800. Part 5. The battle raged across the void, lighting up the darkness with bursts of energy and streaks of plasma. The alien sentinels moved with cold efficiency, their attacks relentless and calculated. The human fleet fought back as best they could, but it was clear from the start that they were outmatched. Shields flickered under the barrage of enemy fire, and several smaller ships were already drifting lifelessly in space. On the bridge of the Eclipse, Captain Ryan Carter barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Divert power to go. The forward shields. Keep those engines running no matter what." Commander Blake stood nearby, his face grim but focused. He had been right about one thing: they couldn't afford to hesitate. Every second counted in this fight, and the fleet's survival depended on quick decisions. But even Blake knew they were barely holding on. The Sentinels seemed to anticipate every move, countering human tactics with precision that bordered on supernatural. "We're losing too many ships," Blake said, his voice tight with frustration. "If we don't pull back soon, we'll be wiped out." Ryan clenched his jaw. Retreating felt like admitting defeat, but he couldn't deny the truth of Blake's words. The fleet was stretched thin, its resources dwindling fast. Yet, somewhere out there, Ava and her team were still alive, or at least Ryan hoped they were. Pulling back now might mean abandoning them for good. "Not yet," Ryan replied firmly. "We hold our ground until we hear something from the recon team. If they've found a way to fight these things, we need to give them time." Blake didn't argue further, though his expression made it clear he disagreed. Instead, he turned his attention back to the battle, issuing commands to the gunners and coordinating evasive maneuvers. For now, the chain of command held, but Ryan could feel the cracks forming beneath the surface. Meanwhile, deep within the icy crevice near Europa, Ava Morales and her crew worked feverishly to repair the damaged recon craft. Nathan crouched beside the thruster, his hands smeared with grease as he reconnected wires and rerouted power. The hum in Ava's mind had faded, leaving behind an unsettling clarity. She knew what the Sentinels were and why they had come. "They're not just machines," she repeated quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "They're weapons. Ancient ones designed to protect something far older than humanity." One of the volunteers glanced at her nervously. "Protect what? And who built them?" Ava shook her head. "I don't know all the details, but whatever it is, it's worth killing for. That's why they're here, to stop us from finding out." Nathan looked up from his work, his brow furrowed. "So what does that mean for us? Do we keep hiding, or do we try to warn the fleet?" Ava hesitated, weighing their options. Staying hidden meant surviving a little longer, but it also meant letting the Sentinels continue their assault unchecked. Warning the fleet was risky. They'd have to leave the safety of the crevice and risk being spotted, but it might give humanity a fighting chance. "We go," Ava said finally. "Fix the thruster, then head straight for the fleet. We can't let them fight blind." Nathan nodded and redoubled his efforts. Within minutes, the thruster roared back to life, sending vibrations through the hull. Ava took a deep breath and climbed into the pilot's seat, gripping the controls tightly. "Everyone strap in," she ordered. "This is going to get rough." As the recon craft emerged from the crevice, the alien sentinel loomed ahead, its sleek form glinting ominously. In the dim light, Ava pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through debris fields and narrow gaps in the ice. The sentinel gave chase immediately, firing pulse after pulse of energy that narrowly missed the speeding craft. "Hold on!" Ava shouted as she banked sharply to avoid another blast. The ship groaned under the strain, but she refused to slow down. Every second brought them closer to the fleet and, hopefully, salvation. Back aboard the Eclipse, the situation grew increasingly dire. Several ships had been destroyed outright, while others limped away, their crews struggling to stay alive. Ryan watched helplessly as another vessel exploded in a fiery burst, its crew lost forever. "Captain, we're taking heavy damage." An officer called out, panic creeping into his voice. "Shields are down to 10%, Ryan gritted his teeth. They couldn't keep this up much longer. Just as he prepared to order a retreat, a faint signal appeared on the radar, a small blip racing toward them at high speed. "It's the recon craft," someone exclaimed. "They're back." Relief surged through Ryan, but it was short-lived. Moments later, the alien sentinel pursuing Ava's ship entered the fray, unleashing a devastating volley of fire that crippled two nearby vessels. "Ava, report!" Ryan demanded over the COMS dot. Her voice crackled through the speakers, strained, but determined. "Captain, we've got intel on the enemy. They're not just machines. They're ancient guardians protecting something big. We think." Her transmission cut off as another blast rocked the recon craft. On the main viewport, Ryan watched in horror as the ship veered wildly, smoke trailing behind it. "We're hit," Ava shouted, trying to stabilize. Ryan's mind raced. He couldn't lose Ava not when she might hold the key to understanding the Sentinels. But saving her meant risking the entire fleet. "Blake, organize a defensive perimeter around the recon craft," Ryan ordered. "Keep those Sentinels off them long enough to dock." Blake hesitated, clearly unhappy with the plan. "Sir, that's suicide. We're barely holding on as it is." "I don't care," Ryan snapped. "Do it." Blake grumbled but obeyed, barking orders to the remaining ships. The fleet formed a loose ring around the recon craft, pouring everything they had into fending off the relentless Sentinels. Explosions lit up the void as human and machine clashed in a desperate bid for survival. Finally, against all odds, the recon craft slipped into the Eclipse's docking bay. Ryan sprinted to meet Ava as soon as the airlock opened. She stumbled out, battered but alive, with Nathan close behind. "You made it," Ryan said, relief washing over him. Ava nodded grimly. "Barely, but we've got information details about how the Sentinels operate. It's not much, but it might be enough to turn the tide." Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tell me everything." As Ava explained the nature of the Sentinels and their connection to an ancient civilization, Nathan worked with the engineering team to analyze the data recovered during the mission. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The Sentinels weren't invincible. They operated on neural networks vulnerable to specific frequencies. "If we can disrupt those networks," Nathan said, excitement creeping into his voice, "we might be able to disable them." Ryan exchanged a glance with Ava. It was a long shot, but it was better than nothing. "Get to work," he told Nathan. "We'll buy you as much time as we can." Outside, the battle continued to rage. The fleet was battered and bruised, but they refused to give up. Humanity's last stand wasn't over yet, not while there was still hope. Word count, approximately 800. Part 6. The plan was simple but dangerous. Use the information gathered by Ava and Nathan to create a weapon capable of disrupting the Sentinels' neural networks. It was their only chance to level the playing field, or at least survive long enough to regroup. But time was running out, and the fleet was falling apart. On the bridge of the Eclipse, Captain Ryan Carter watched as his crew scrambled to implement the strategy. Engineers worked tirelessly to modify existing systems, while gunners held off wave after wave of Sentinel attacks. The human ships were battered, their hulls scarred from relentless enemy fire. Every second felt like borrowed time. "Captain, we've rerouted power to the experimental disruptor," an officer reported, his voice strained. "But it's not ready yet." "We need more time." Ryan clenched his fists. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Outside, the Sentinels continued their assault, picking off the weakest ships first. Explosions lit up the void, each blast a reminder of how close they were to total defeat. "We'll make do with what we've got," Ryan said firmly. "Divert every available resource to the disruptor. If it fails, we're finished anyway." "Commander." Blake stood nearby, his face pale but resolute. He had argued against this plan earlier, insisting that focusing all their efforts on a single weapon was reckless. But now, seeing the desperation in the crew's eyes, he stayed silent. Even he knew there were no other options left. In the engineering bay, Ava Morales and Nathan Cole worked side by side, piecing together the disruptor device. The concept was straightforward: emit a frequency that would overload the Sentinels. Neural networks, but building it under such extreme conditions was anything but easy. Sparks flew as tools clashed against metal, and wires snaked across the floor in chaotic patterns. "This is insane," Nathan muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Even if we finish this, there's no guarantee it'll work." "It has." Ava replied sharply. Her hands moved quickly, connecting circuits and testing outputs. "If it doesn't, none of us are getting out of here alive." Nathan glanced at her, noticing the determination etched into her features. For days, she'd been pushing herself harder than anyone else, driven by a sense of purpose he couldn't fully understand. Part of him wanted to ask why she cared so much, but he already knew the answer. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving humanity could fight back, even against impossible odds. "All right," Nathan said finally. "Let's focus on the task at hand. What's next?" Ava pointed to a console glowing faintly in the corner. "We need to calibrate the emitter. Without precise settings, the disruptor won't target the right frequencies." As they worked, the ship shuddered violently, throwing both of them off balance. Alarms blared overhead, warning of another breach in the shields. Ava steadied herself against a wall, her heart pounding. How much longer can the fleet hold out? She asked, her voice barely audible over the noise. Nathan shook his head. "Not long. If we don't finish soon, it won't matter." Meanwhile, aboard the damaged recon craft, Lucas Grayson sat alone in the cockpit, staring blankly at the controls. He'd been part of Ava's team during the mission to Europa, but something had changed since then. His thoughts were clouded, his mind filled with whispers he couldn't explain. At first, he dismissed them as stress or fatigue, but now he realized they were something far worse. "You hear me, don't you?" A voice echoed in his head, cold and emotionless. It wasn't Ava's voice or anyone else's from the fleet. It belonged to the Sentinels. Lucas closed his eyes, trying to block it out. But the voice persisted. "You know what must be done. Humanity cannot win this war. Surrender, and your suffering will end." He shook his head furiously, tears streaming down his face. "No, leave me alone." But the voice wouldn't stop. It twisted his fears and doubts, feeding on his insecurities until he could think of nothing else. Slowly, painfully, Lucas gave in. Rising unsteadily to his feet, he accessed the ship's navigation system and input coordinates leading directly to the heart of the fleet. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was apologizing to. Then, without hesitation, he activated the engines and sped toward the Eclipse. Back on the flagship, Ava and Nathan completed the final adjustments to the disruptor. Exhausted but triumphant, they carried the device to the bridge, where Ryan awaited anxiously. "It's ready," Ava announced, placing the disruptor on a central console. "But we'll only get one shot. If we miss, the Sentinels will destroy us." Ryan nodded grimly. "Understood. Prepare to deploy it." Before anyone could act, the radar pinged loudly, alerting them to an incoming object. Ryan frowned, studying the screen. "What is that?" "It's the recon craft," Nathan said, his voice tight with alarm. "It's heading straight for—" "You said it's moving too fast." Ava's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Very wrong, she ordered. "Find out what's going on." Static crackled over the comms, followed by a distorted voice. "This is Lucas Grayson. I can't stop it. They made me." Before anyone could respond, the recon craft slammed into the Eclipse's outer hull, causing a massive explosion. That rocked the entire ship. Smoke filled the corridors, and alarms screamed as the crew scrambled to contain the damage. "What happened?" Ryan demanded, coughing through the haze. Nathan stared at the monitors, his face pale. "Sabotage. The Sentinels used him to cripple our defenses." Ava's hands trembled as she processed the implications. Not only had they lost valuable resources, but the attack had also exposed their position. The Sentinels would be on them. "Within minutes, deploy the disruptor," Ryan shouted. "Now!" With seconds to spare, the crew launched the disruptor into space. A bright pulse of energy erupted outward, bathing the battlefield in an eerie glow. For a moment, everything froze. The Sentinels halted mid-attack, their movements sluggish and uncoordinated. "It's working!" Nathan exclaimed, relief flooding his voice. But the victory was short-lived. While most of the Sentinels were disabled, a few larger ships remained unaffected, their systems shielded against the disruptor's effects. These vessels turned their attention to the Eclipse, preparing for a final devastating strike. "We can't hold them off forever," Blake said grimly, gripping the railing tightly. Ryan met his gaze, resolve hardening in his eyes. "Then, we make sure they remember us." As the Sentinels closed in, the human fleet rallied together, pouring everything they had into one last stand. Outnumbered and outgunned, they fought with a ferocity born of desperation. And though defeat seemed inevitable, the stars bore witness to humanity's refusal to go quietly into the night. Word count, approximately 800. Part 7. The disruptor's pulse had done its job, temporarily disabling most of the Sentinels, but the largest ships remained operational, their advanced shielding protecting them from the weapon's effects. These remaining vessels loomed ominously over the battered human fleet, their sleek forms glinting coldly in the light of distant stars. The humans knew this was it, their final stand. On the bridge of the Eclipse, Captain Ryan Carter issued orders with a calmness that belied the chaos around him. Smoke filled the air, and sparks rained down from damaged panels as crew members scrambled to keep the ship running. Ryan's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Steady and commanding, "All remaining ships, focus fire on the lead Sentinel," he ordered. "If we can take out their command vessel, it might disrupt their coordination." Commander Blake nodded grimly, relaying the order to the rest of the fleet. What little remained of humanity's warships regrouped, forming a loose formation around the Eclipse. Their weapons blazed defiantly, firing volley after volley at the massive alien craft. But the Sentinel absorbed the hits without flinching, its shields holding firm against the onslaught. "They're too strong," an officer shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Our weapons aren't doing enough damage." Ryan clenched his fists but refused to give up. "Keep firing. We don't stop until they're gone, or we are." Ava Morales stood beside Nathan Cole near the tactical console, her eyes fixed on the main viewport. She watched as the sentinels closed in, their movements methodical and precise. Despite everything they'd learned about these machines, their origins, their purpose, it still felt surreal to face them head-on. They weren't just weapons. They were relics of an ancient civilization, built to protect secrets older than time itself. "We've got one shot left," Nathan said quietly, breaking the tense silence. He pointed to a display showing the last functioning disruptor module. "If we can get close enough to plant it directly on their command ship, we might be able to overload their core systems." Ava frowned. "Close enough? That's suicide. Any ship that tries will never make it back." Nathan didn't argue. He knew she was right, but they were out of options. Then someone has to go willingly. Someone who understands what's at stake. Ava stared at him, realization dawning slowly. "You're volunteering," he hesitated, then nodded. "It's my design. If anyone can make it work, it's me." "No," Ava said firmly, stepping forward. "I'm going. You stay here and help the captain coordinate the fleet. Besides," her voice softened slightly, "I've already seen what these things are capable of. I know how to fight them." Before Nathan could protest further, Ryan approached, overhearing their conversation. His expression darkened as he pieced together their plan. "Absolutely not," Ryan said sharply. "We need both of you here. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Ava replied, meeting his gaze evenly. "Captain, if we don't do this now, none of us are walking away from this alive. Let me finish what I started." For a moment, Ryan looked like he might argue. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. "All right, but you're taking backup with you. Pick your team carefully." Minutes later, Ava climbed aboard a small assault shuttle, accompanied by a handful of volunteers. Among them was Lieutenant Marcus Hawley, a seasoned pilot known for his quick reflexes and sharp instincts. As the shuttle detached from the Eclipse and sped toward the enemy command ship, Ava addressed her crew. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the mission. "Once we're inside, we'll have minutes, maybe seconds, to plant the disruptor and get clear. Stick to the plan and don't hesitate. Understood?" The volunteers nodded, their faces pale but determined. None of them expected to survive, but they understood the stakes. This wasn't just about saving themselves. It was about giving humanity a fighting chance. As the shuttle approached the Sentinel command ship, its surface came into view, jagged protrusions jutting out like thorns, glowing veins pulsing with energy. It looked less like a machine and more like some monstrous organism, alive and breathing. Ava's stomach churned, but she pushed the feeling aside. Fear wouldn't help her now. "Hold on," Marcus muttered, gripping the controls tightly. "Here comes the hard part." The shuttle dove toward the command ship, dodging bursts of plasma fire as alarms screamed inside the cockpit. Ava braced herself as the craft shuddered violently, its hull groaning under the strain. Finally, they reached a weak point in the Sentinel's defenses, a narrow opening leading to its interior. "We're in," Marcus announced, though his relief was short-lived. "Now let's hope we can find the core before they tear us apart." Inside the Sentinel command ship, the environment was eerily organic. Walls pulsed faintly with light, and strange symbols etched into the surfaces glowed softly. The air hummed with a low, constant vibration that made Ava's skin crawl. Every step felt heavier, as if the ship itself was resisting their presence. "This place, it feels alive," one of the volunteers whispered, clutching their weapon nervously. "It probably is," Ava replied, scanning the area. "Stay focused, we don't have much time." Guided by Nathan's instructions over the comms, the team navigated through twisting corridors until they reached the central chamber. At its heart lay the Sentinel's core, a massive, pulsating sphere of energy suspended in midair. The sight was mesmerizing, almost beautiful, but Ava forced herself to look away. Beauty or not, it had to be destroyed. "Plant the disruptor," she ordered, motioning for 2 volunteers to set up the device. Make sure it's secure. As they worked, the ship began to react. The walls shifted, closing in around them, and a deep rumble echoed through the chamber. Ava spun around, raising her weapon as shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. They weren't sentinels, at least not entirely. Their forms were humanoid but distorted, their faces obscured by shifting patterns of light. What are they? Marcus asked, his voice trembling. I don't know, Ava replied, aiming her weapon. But they're not letting us leave. The figures lunged forward, moving faster than expected. Gunfire erupted as the team fought back, but the attackers seemed impervious to bullets. One by one, the volunteers fell, leaving only Ava and Marcus standing. Ava, we need to go, Marcus shouted, tugging at her arm. Not yet, she snapped. The disruptor isn't ready. Finally, the device beeped, signaling activation. Ava grabbed Marcus and sprinted toward the exit, the core behind them beginning to destabilize. The chamber shook violently, chunks of debris falling from the ceiling as the Sentinel systems collapsed. They barely made it to the shuttle before the explosion hit. The shockwave sent the craft spinning wildly, throwing everyone inside against the walls. Through the viewport, Ava watched as the command ship disintegrated, its destruction rippling outward and disabling the remaining Sentinels. We did it, Marcus murmured weakly, slumping in his seat. Ava didn't respond. She stared at the wreckage, her mind racing. They had won for now, but the cost had been immense, and the questions lingered. Who had built the Sentinels? What were they guarding? And why had they targeted humanity? As the surviving fleet regrouped, Ryan hailed Ava over the comms. Good work, Lieutenant. You saved us all. Ava managed a small smile, though her heart felt heavy. Let's just hope it was worth it. Word count, approximately 800. Part 8. The stars shimmered faintly in the distance as the battered fleet drifted through space. The battle was over, but victory felt hollow. Too many ships had been lost, too many lives sacrificed. Captain Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, staring out at the wreckage left behind by the Sentinel's destruction. Pieces of alien metal floated silently among the debris of human vessels, a grim reminder of what they'd endured. Captain, an officer said softly, breaking the silence. We've accounted for the survivors. Only 30% of the fleet made it. Ryan nodded, his expression unreadably somber. 30% wasn't enough, not to rebuild, not to reclaim Earth, but it was all they had. Send out a message to every ship still operational. Tell them to conserve fuel and supplies. We're heading into deep space. Deep space? Commander Blake asked, stepping closer. His voice carried a mix of confusion and frustration. Why shouldn't we? Go back to Earth, see if anyone's still alive? Ryan shook his head. Earth went dark decades ago. Even if there are survivors, reaching them will take years, and we don't have the resources for that kind of journey. For now, our priority is survival. Blake clenched his jaw but didn't argue further. He knew Ryan was right, even if the decision stung. Humanity's future, if there was one, would have to be built somewhere else. Ava Morales sat alone in her quarters, staring blankly at the wall. Her body ached from the mission, and her mind was heavy with grief. She replayed the events over and over in her head, the volunteers who hadn't returned, the eerie whispers that haunted her dreams, the glowing core of the Sentinel command ship collapsing into chaos. It was done, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. There was a knock at the door, pulling her from her thoughts. Nathan entered cautiously, holding a small device in his hand. Hey, he said gently. Can I come in? Ava nodded, gesturing for him to sit. What is it? Nathan placed the device on the table between them. It was a recording module, its surface scratched and worn. I found this while going through the Recon Craft's data logs. It's from Lucas, before the sabotage. Ava frowned. What does it say? Nathan hesitated, then pressed play. A distorted voice filled the room, trembling with fear and regret. This is Lieutenant Lucas Grayson, the recording began. If you're hearing this, it means I failed. The Sentinels, they got inside my head. They made me do things I never wanted to do. I tried to fight it, but they were too strong. To everyone I hurt, I'm sorry. Please, tell them we didn't give up. Tell them the stars will never forget. The recording ended abruptly, leaving silence in its wake. Ava stared at the device, her throat tight. Lucas had been a victim, just like the rest of them. He hadn't chosen betrayal, it had been forced upon him. He sounds like he was trying to warn us, Nathan said quietly. About the Sentinels, about what they're capable of. Ava nodded slowly. Yeah, and maybe he was right. This isn't over. Destroying their command ship doesn't mean we've won. There could be more of them out there. Nathan sighed, rubbing his temples. More Sentinels? How are we supposed to fight them when we're barely holding together as it is? We adapt, Ava replied firmly. That's what humanity does. We survive, no matter how bad things get, and we learn. Whatever those machines were guarding, it's something big, something worth killing for. If we can figure out what it is, maybe we can turn it to our advantage. Days turned into weeks as the fleet limped through interstellar space. Supplies dwindled, and morale sank lower with each passing day. But amidst the despair, there were moments of hope. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged ships, scavenging parts from wrecks left behind after the battle. Scientists studied fragments of Sentinel technology, searching for clues about their creators. Slowly, painfully, the survivors began to piece their lives back together. One evening, Ryan gathered the senior officers on the bridge for a meeting. The mood was tense, but determined. They had survived against impossible odds, and now they needed a plan for the future. We can't keep drifting forever, Ryan said, addressing the group. We need a destination, a place where we can regroup and rebuild. Any suggestions? Sam Lewis stepped forward, holding a datapad. There's a system about 6 months away. It's on the edge of explored space, so it's risky. But the readings suggest habitable planets. If we ration our resources carefully, we might make it. Ryan considered her words, then nodded. All right, set course for the system. Let's see if we can find a new home. As the fleet changed course, Ava stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. She thought about Earth, the blue-green orb she'd seen in old photographs, the world she'd never known but still mourned. She thought about the Sentinels and the secrets they guarded, secrets that might one day lead humanity to salvation or destruction. And she thought about Lucas's final message. Tell them the stars will never forget. Those words stayed with her, echoing in her mind like a promise. No matter how far they traveled, no matter how much they lost, humanity's story would endure. The stars bore witness to their resilience, their courage, their refusal to give up, even in the face of annihilation. Behind her, Nathan joined her at the viewport. Neither spoke for a long time, content to simply watch the stars flicker in the darkness. You think we'll make it? Nathan asked finally, his voice quiet. Ava smiled faintly. We have to. Because if we don't, the stars really will forget. U.S. In the vast emptiness of space, the fleet disappeared into the void, carrying the legacy of those who had fought and died. Somewhere far away, the stars shimmered faintly, bearing witness to humanity's unyielding spirit and the hope that someday, somewhere, they would rise again. Word count, approximately 800.